episode number 245 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. My guest today is Carrie Cohen. Carrie is a psychotherapist who helps couples who are navigating infertility by healing trauma and stress, strengthening their relationships, and ultimately improving their chances of conceiving. In addition to practicing as a psychotherapist for the past 24 years, Carrie is also a certified clinical hypnotherapist, a rapid transformational therapy practitioner, an integrative health coach, and a certified nutrition coach. Carrie's approach to her client work is multidimensional and holistic, utilizing an eclectic therapeutic model that is tailored to her clients' needs. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. Welcome to the podcast, Carrie.
Hi, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. I would love for you to share your background and how you got into the work that you do with the listeners.
All right. Uh, for starters, I have been a practicing psychotherapist for 25 years, and I've had a private practice for 20 of those. And when COVID happened, I moved my practice online and then eventually expanded into coaching so that I could work with my clients just globally and more flexibly. And specifically, my focus really in my work is on fertility and couples and mental health. And what really brought me to that is my own fertility journey, which was between 2006 and 2009, which was a really, really challenging time for my husband and I. And generally, as a therapist, you're not really supporting people on issues and dynamics that you yourself are going through. So there really wasn't a space for that. But now it's nearly, well, my daughter's turning 14, so almost 14 years has passed. And now I'm really able to bridge my personal experience and fill in some of the gaps that I saw were there, along with my professional experience as a clinician to really help people in ways that I see that is really important and sort of those missing pieces for them.
For sure. And we had just a little quick pre-talk, and you were talking about relationships and how relationships get impacted.
Mm-hmm. So in general, I would say on the mental health side for just individuals is that the longer the fertility journey wears on, the more sort of depressed I would say people get. And I'm not even talking clinical depression per se, but a sort of they're where they have this sort of depressed cloud hanging over them,
Mm-hmm.
hopelessness, loss of pleasure in things they used to enjoy. Um, Feeling not motivated by the things that used to motivate them. So I see that really. I mean, that was my own personal experience, and I see that with a lot of my clients. And then you pair that with the anxiety. So the anxiety of anticipating if you're going to get your period this month, or anticipating if you're doing fertility treatments, if it's going to work, and what happens after you get your transfer and you're waiting, the 2 week wait. So there's really a mix of depressive symptoms and anxious symptoms. And really, those are, I would say, pretty common amongst women. And then if we think about that, when we think about how that impacts the couple, so the partner um, can't really solve that for her, right? So he can't really do anything. And I think for him, he starts to feel sort of a powerlessness and helplessness to be able to really kind of make things feel better or make things better. And I think what happens is that over time, that couple really starts to um, become very sort of weighed down and heavy by this enduring, ominous, unresolvable issue. And again, if it's a year, it's probably manageable. But for many couples that I talk to, I did 4 rounds of IUI and 1 round of IVF, and that was in a 3-year period. Plus, I had an ectopic, and I had, with some other things. And but I know some couples who are 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, they're doing, 15 rounds of IVF. And it's just so taxing on your body, and anything that's taxing on your body, of course, is taxing on your mind.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important that you're even verbalizing these things, because sometimes people go through them, but they don't verbalize it, or at least in their mind really see what is happening. Because I feel like when people hear that, it makes it more validating, because sometimes you just go through whatever you're going through and you're so focused on really the fertility journey that you forget how this can impact you going through it. And I think hearing that brings a level of validation for a lot of people.
Mhm. That's an excellent point, because we would sort of think about, there's multiple pathways operating simultaneously. So you've got the one pathway where you're doing whatever it is that you're doing, the behavioral stuff, in order to get pregnant. Then you have what's going on with your physical health as a result of that, whatever you're doing, whatever kind of assistance you're getting. So you have the physical piece. Then you have also the mental health piece. And so oftentimes people forget about the physical and the mental health, because they become so focused on making a baby. And that was my experience too, that we tend to put the other elements into the background, because the goal to make a baby moves into the foreground. And the reality is that those other elements are really important as part of making all that happen.
Absolutely. It really is. And it does also, I always talk about energy in Chinese medicine, and just like, the work that I do, energy is so important when it comes to reproductive health, because reproductive health demands a lot of energy from us, and emotions can really tap out our energy.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it's such an important point, because then if you have also women who are working, so I was working during my journey. I had a private practice. So I was carrying the energy of running a business.
Hmm.
I also was carrying the energy of working with clients, and then the energy, the bandwidth of trying to make a baby. It's like there really wasn't a lot of space left for other things, but there was a part of me that, just as a therapist, knows the value in making sure I'm paying attention to those things. So I would, squeeze out little slices of that pie to try to create some space for the other aspects of my being, because I intellectually knew they were important, even though I just did not have a lot of bandwidth for all of it.
Right. And that's a good point, because you get to the point where you're so depleted, you can't even think about how to get your energy back.
Yeah. Yeah, that really is a challenge. I mean, we would say that in, fertility, during a fertility journey, I would say that also for anyone who is experiencing a depressive episode or anxiety, that's just taking up so much energy that you don't really have the capacity to think. The other thing, in order to address it, the other thing I was going to say about that is, if we think about this from a nervous system regulation standpoint, that when you're on a fertility journey and there's a lot of stress, you're probably oscillating between fight, flight, and shutdown mode.
Hmm.
And when we're in fight, flight, or shutdown mode, our thinking brain really goes offline. So the ability to really think rationally and clearly about next steps
Hmm.
is really, it's compromised. And here's where I feel like the spouse comes in to say, like, hey, babe, let's sort of think about this. We're on round 7. I've watched you deteriorate over the last 3 years. You're like a shell of a woman now. Can we take a step back and really think about what we're doing, why we're doing this, where we're going, what the implications of continuing on this journey are? And I think that while that would initially make a woman feel potentially very anxious, I think ultimately she would feel so held and supported.
Yeah. And then another thing is how this impacts relationships. And what I find in general, like if you are working together as a couple, it actually serves to provide strength and comfort if you allow that to happen. But again, it's another one of those things that gets put on the back burner. But it actually could be something that can serve as a fuel and something to help, because I've seen it. I've seen people go through the whole journey, and then I talk to them about it, and they say, okay, we spent a little more time together. We put some more time to connecting or having like intimate moments outside of the fertile window, just
Uh-huh.
reconnecting. And they realize later it brings them more strength and comfort. Whereas it, in the end of the day, helps them, even though at first logically it feels like, oh, well, I can't think about that right now.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a very insightful point you're making because one of the premises that I hold when I'm working with all couples, and this is especially important for the fertility couple, is that the couple serves as a therapeutic vehicle for change. And the way I work with couples is we work through all the things we need to work through. And in the end, what I want them to have is the platform in which they are working with me on, that I want them to internalize that into their couple so that they can take it with them. So initially, the work with me is the therapeutic vehicle, the space that we create, the time we have together. And so ultimately, though, I want them to integrate that and incorporate that inside their couple so that they could take it with them. Because the reality is that the couple is the therapeutic vehicle. And when they become parents, that serves as the barometer for the way the household's going to run and the container for the baby that they're going to bring home. So there's a lot of benefit of doing that work even when you're not having problems. It's really just boosting and strengthening that bond so that you know how to really capitalize and maximize the all the benefits that come with being a part of a couple.
So important what you just said. And really to think about it is that is the center. It is important. It's important for the baby, for the goal, it's at the center of it. And yet it gets ignored so many times. But it's not only the center, but it also is therapy. It's therapy for you, and it's energy, and it creates like this wholesomeness where and foundation for the family growth.
Yeah, for sure. I see it as really critical. And I could I'm trained clinically, so I get that. But also, it's been my experience in my family. And when my husband and I are good, our family is flowing really smoothly. And when we've gone through struggles, we've been married almost 19 years. And when you're together long enough, everybody has ups and downs. And if we're having a challenging time, it definitely reflects in the family dynamic. It reflects in my daughter. And so I think, and that's not unusual, right? For ups and downs. So really the key is for couples to know when they are on a downturn and to have the resilience and also the skill set to be able to sort of bring themselves back so they can get grounded again.
So it
All
sounds
of which
like
is what I teach.
awareness. It all like comes back to awareness is kind of because I think that's where things get missed, is that when you just don't pay attention, and then you
Mhm.
set a new dynamic that you don't even realize you're setting, and then it just starts to change.
Mhm.
And so it sounds like it all starts with awareness. But somebody listening, like, what are ways to cope? What are things that people can do to get back on track?
Yes. So few things. So one is, if you're in a couple and you're interested in doing this in a couple, one of the things I would do is I would actually carve out at least 30 minutes a week to have sort of a check-in with your partner. And the purpose of the check-in is to really access each other's state of mind. What's
I
going
like
on
that.
in your mind? What are you struggling with? What are you feeling? What are your thoughts this week? So really it's sort of access into the state of mind. And when we're in a relationship with someone, a very significant partnership with someone, it's really important that we have a sense and a pulse on what each other's state of mind is. So, as a baseline, that is something I recommend to all couples. And then moving on from there, what I also suggest is, in addition to that, is for couples to have a sort of like you can call it a date, or you could just call it sort of like an opportunity for connecting outside of that 30-minute time where you're really talking about what's going on in each other's mind. Another time for connecting. And I think when you're on a fertility journey, gosh, it is so important. And so one of the things that my husband and I would do, so pre trying to conceive, we used to do day trips a lot. Like we would always, it was something that we always looked forward to. One of us would plan it. We would do a day trip. And then, of course, when we were trying to conceive, everything was focused on that. I really didn't have the energy or the desire to do day trips. I just was not in a good space. But there did come a point where we sort of realized that like we lost that. So we started carving that out again, and we started carving out day trips to really begin to get back to cultivating just our couple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you really want a strong couple also before you bring your baby into the world. So that would be the second thing, is doing the things that you used to enjoy pre-trying to conceive so that you could bring some of that back into your relationship and liven it up again. We do want the vitality there, because I think the relationship can start to feel deadened when you are, it's such a paradox. You're trying to create a baby, which is a life, but the relationship itself can get so deadened. It loses its vitality because all of the focus goes on trying to, create this new life. And I think that it's really important that couples carve out space for the vital aspects of the relationship. And then I'm a big fan of nervous system regulation practices, and I could share you could put it in the show notes. I'll share a PDF on that I have, because I just find that it is so grounding, and it is a skill set for people that if they can really wrap their sort of mind around it, you can integrate it where it doesn't take extra time. It's just like an extra skill set to really bring yourself back into regulation, and then be able to have the conversations you need to have from a regulated state of mind and body.
I love that you said that you like nervous system regulation. I'm all about the vagus nerve. I'm all about that, because really that's where homeostasis comes in. Homeostasis, aka yin and yang balance. That's where balance comes in. When you are coming forth into the world from a state of balance, you have more clarity, more ease, and you can breathe. There's a sense of kind of coming up for air, which I think people stop when they're in this state where they have to get things done, or they feel like they don't have time for themselves and they put everything off. Then you get into like you said before, a fight and flight, and you're not coming from a place of clarity.
Right. Yeah. And with nervous system, so story follows state. So if you have an experience with your partner and you are in a fight flight, that is going to determine the outcome of that discussion, versus if you are in a regulated state, the outcome of that discussion is going to be so different. And so I work with my clients really on recognizing where they are. And for me, it was very helpful for me when I really started working with it. I would say probably about 10 years ago, in my practice. But really what prompted me to work with it was because 10 years ago, my daughter was 4, and we were sort of in the throes of the toddler years, and it was really stressful. And I needed to get a handle on my emotions and have a way to manage my own stressful reactions to her. And that was really I would say a lifesaver for me.
Amazing. And so what are some of the things, I know that you had a PDF, but what are some things that people can do just after hearing this that they can start right away to help?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about nervous system regulation practice is that it's all the things that we already do. It's just a matter of doing them intentionally and at the right time. And so if we can sort of think about how, sort of recognizing so I use the imagery of a ladder, which comes from polyvagal theory. So if we could think about the top of the ladder is ventral vagal, which is safety. You go down a few rungs, you're in sympathetic activation, fight, flight. You go down another few rungs, you're in dorsal vagal shutdown. So the first thing I tell my clients to do is start to track where you are throughout the day, because it's natural and normal to move up and down that ladder throughout the day. Right? Like you've had a really long day at work, you've had a few really challenging clients or a few difficult conversations, and you might actually dip down into shutdown temporarily, go watch like an hour of a Netflix show and just shut out the world. So where we want to be mindful is when we're stuck in these states chronically, right? So if we're in shutdown for 3 days, we can't get out of bed, or in fight flight for weeks, that's physiologically speaking what burnout is. So the first thing is starting to track where you are throughout the day, so that you could really just be mindful of what your state is. The second thing is figuring out what triggers that. So like, wow, that's interesting. I find myself like feeling like I'm in sort of like fight flight mode. What just happened? So really then being able to identify the triggers, because the beauty to me in this practice is that we can actually recondition our responses. And so we retrain our nervous system. So as a psychotherapist, I'm very, very fascinated by subconscious reprogramming in our mind and neuroplasticity. And naturally, I have sort of an interest in how we could do that with our body as well through the nervous system practice. So when we know what our triggers are, we can then actually pair it with some regulation resource. And the first one that I really love is to do what I call a ventral vagal visualization, which essentially is to walk yourself through a visualization exercise of whatever your happy place might be, invoking as many of the senses as you can, because that's really the power in using our imagination. And then you begin to pair that visualization with a trigger. And over time, you start to dilute the potency of the trigger, the body trigger.
I love
so those
that.
are some like quick, easy strategies. It is a practice that's fairly comprehensive to learn, but once you've got it, like it becomes innate in you.
I love it. I love it. I'm so 100% on board on a lot of the things that you say. I also studied hypnotherapy. I think that we have that in common, and I love the anchor, kind of like anchoring into some kind of, it's almost like you're being conscious about the trigger. You're making a trigger that works for you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then just that repetition of doing it over and over again, then you're really programming yourself, but in a conscious way. So like sometimes we get programmed by default. We want to be conscious on the programming so that it works in our favor.
Yes. And, the other thing I will just sort of add to that is under stress, we all resort to our default positions, our old stances, and just giving ourselves some grace, recognizing like when we fall back into that old default state. Like the key though is that so with nervous system practice, which you probably know, but for your listeners, is that the key here is to increase our window of tolerance so that we can handle more things in a regulated way. B, become more flexible and adaptable. And resilient. So things come in, we respond to them, and then we can move ourselves back into a regulated state. The goal is not to be regulated all the time, right? That would be just so unrealistic. So over time, our capacity to handle stress and stressful events really starts to increase. And that's how we develop resilience. And gosh, when you're going through a fertility journey, I mean, the ability to handle stress is probably top of the list.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's observing yourself, not judging yourself, observing objectively and just catching more to work with yourself rather than coming from a place of judgment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. And so if people wanted to work with you, you do work virtually, correct?
I do work virtually and I work globally. So what I have going on right now is for the I don't know when this is going to air, but generally speaking, so I am offering couples one 60-minute taster session. So they come to me, I have them fill something out beforehand, and I give them at least 3, but probably more action steps of things that they could do to really start to clear initially whatever it is that they are struggling with and give them a path forward. So that is something that I offer, so people can have the experience of me. I think it's a big emotional investment when couples are committing to work with someone. So I offer that. I also have I'm getting ready to roll out a 30-day one-on-one for a woman who is going through fertility treatment, who feels like she's lost herself. And she really wants to get back to feeling grounded, feeling more in touch with who she was before she started trying to conceive. And so that is 30 days. And it's just chock full of good stuff with, time with me, other support services, messaging access, and things like that. And then, of course, and that's again, it's sort of a small investment for people if they are not really sure yet, if they're on the fence. And then, of course, I've got, longer term one-on-one, and I'll be working on building out some support groups and some communities. I'm just sort of just getting a feel for what my clients want and what the community wants.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carrie, for coming on. Some great information that you shared, really important things that I personally am so aligned with because I know that they're really powerful. So it was a pleasure talking to you, Carrie.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I appreciate the time.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.